What's up, everybody? John Maddox here, coming at you with another late-night logical, plausible, probable. We're gonna be having an open mic discussion. You never know where we might end up. But I will tell you this, before we're done, we will have put some Evos in their place, because when I'm finished, you done.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to my third time trying out this whole Q&A, 10-minute one-on-one discussions thing. Kind of enjoy it. It's fun, a little more calm, a little more laid back, and seems to enable some nice dialogue, and it's a nice way to kind of kick things off, get things started, and hopefully we can turn this into a little bit more of a regular thing. I want to say major thank you to all everybody who's already showed up. Ramen, as usual, already kicking out those super chats. Much appreciated. Welcome, Christian Northman. How are you doing? Honesty Angel, Man Hours. Oh, man, Raw Matt, a.k.a. Young Earth Creation, has made it into the building. What's going on, man? How are you? And John Lang's here. Jerome. Man, everybody's showing up, getting things going here. Cheryl, how are you doing? Cheryl, I want to say thank you for telling me about that little stream going on over on Answers in Atheism, also known as Speed of Pudding Brain. It's really cracking me up what they're doing, as they're they're still struggling with the whole premise of functional information and not really comprehending the usage of the concept and its relevance in relation to improbabilities and abiogenesis and all different things that we've been talking about. It's really amazing. It really fascinates me how they're not grasping the point. And of course, we're also talking about people who claim that it's not actually code. And yeah, they want to argue, is it really information? What's your definition of information? So over there, while they're arguing over, like, is there functional information versus raw Shannon? And then, like, agreeing that there is, we're talking about the same idiots who claim that there isn't actual information in many contexts, or it's not really what we think of as, I mean, it really is fascinating, folks. It's amazing listening to the room of dunce caps going into, wow, it's really fascinating. So earlier today, I had came across an interesting video back in 2017 in the Singularity U conference over in Germany, and I listened to an hour-long lecture on nanotechnology and nano and biotechnology. It's very interesting. And it's ironic that Pudding and the gang are actually having this discussion tonight. And, some of the other folks who've been trash talking me in comments and getting the usual, it's not really code, and, all that kind of stuff. It was very interesting. The guy that was David Hassel, I think his name was, that was giving the keynote at the conference, goes into great detail on a variety of topics in relation to biotech. But said quite a few very interesting different points on what is nanotechnology, what is biotech, how does biological systems compare, and getting into the nitty-gritty of how things have changed over the last 30 years. He's been involved in genomics, and just the incredible revolution that's happened, the exponential decrease in costs and the increase in technology and such. And but one of the things he said, which I thought was kind of stuck out to me, I thought was kind of interesting, and thought I might play here for a quick minute, is about what is biological systems, and what are we actually observing with bacteria and all the different components that enable life to exist. And I thought I'd play a couple clips of that real quick, and we'll get going here in a few minutes.
And how does a living cell operate? These are the most amazing machines to me, because 1 makes 2, 2 make 4, and it does this all using elemental materials. Elemental. This is nanotechnology in action, doing things that our nanotechnologies, the one we've been building, can only dream of. And this has been happening for billions of years on this planet. Now, we know how it works, sort of. This is basic biology. You take a human, you pluck out a cell, you pull out its genome, there's its chromosomes, you unravel the chromosomes, you get a long string of DNA. DNA is transcribed into RNA, the working copy of the nucleic acids, which ultimately are translated into proteins, which build us and every living thing on this planet. Biology 101 in two.
It's kind of interesting, that's a short clip there, but you went into much greater detail about the machinery aspect, and I find it so fascinating the number of atheists that I interact with, and even some not atheists, but the theistic evolutionists and such, that love to claim that it's not actually nanotech. And I'm just like, I don't understand how much more detailed this has to get, and how much more obvious and well accepted in the arena that it actually is. That whether or not you want to continue to cling to this premise that it can create itself, that's that's free, it's fair game. Like if you want to go down that pathway. However, you can't just deny that the pathway exists and continue to be taken seriously. At least I can't take you seriously. It's like this is reaching levels of so far out to lunch and left field. I don't know what to tell you, but anyway, in the context of all this, a lot of y'all that have been following me for a while have seen a clip I played on a fairly regular, off and on the last year, the Royal Society meeting interview with Oxford University, where Dennis Noble was talking to folks about the $10 million prize if you can invent a genetic code and things. And one of the interesting things that David Hassel was talking about in his keynote speech, I pulled that clip from, was the importance of the code. And there's one little section where he made it so clear, I decided to snip it because I figured it might come in handy in future interactions with folks who continue to claim none of these things exist, and it's all in my imagination. And so let's play this real quick.
This is the reason why I love biology, though. Biology is self-assembling nanotechnology with a built-in programming language. No other nanotechnology has this. This is really important.
Man, you know what? Let's play that one more time. I want to make sure that any of the atheists who hear this later, hopefully they'll be paying attention and realize the significance of what they heard. So let's play this one more time.
This is the reason why I love biology, though. Biology is self-assembling nanotechnology with a built-in programming language. No other nanotechnology has this. This is really important.
So yeah, I don't know how much more direct, succinct, and just to the obvious the point that was made. By the way, for folks who think I just like cut this out of context or something, he went into much greater detail about the advantage that people coming into academia now and doing research in genetics and genetic engineering and synthetica and such, the advantage they have given the fact they've grown up in the digital age, and they have a much more intuitive understanding of software and how it works and what has to go into it and what must be executed. And then he talks about, well, if you want to get into this, you better learn a little bit about computing, because if you don't understand an if then else statements and how all that works, then you're just not going to be able to figure out. You're just not going to be able to understand the genome. Like you're screwed if you don't understand the basics of computing. It's just cracking me up listening to him with the passion in which he was speaking and explaining all this stuff, and the opportunities that we have, and then gets into how we can cut and paste genes and all these different things from a digital perspective, and how artificial intelligence is able to really work with biological system, or with genetics, in order to program new synthetic functions, which I thought was pretty cool. And then later on, it gave a really interesting clip, which I'll have to get later on. It talks about how we have to really realize that the cell is an electrical machine, and that's how we're being able to connect cells with computer technology, like our computer technology, which I thought was just incredibly ironic. Like, well, yep, this is not nanotech, ladies and gentlemen. It's not nanotech. Nobody ever listen to anyone on YouTube that claims that anything about biological systems is actually nanotechnology and nanomachines. Like, no. Just ignore all of that and never accept anybody who says that must be some out to lunch believer in sky daddies and magic man in the clouds. But that's just aside. Anyway, so obviously tonight is all about trying out these 10-minute one-on-one conversations. So if anyone wants to come in and have a one-on-one session, the link is pinned, as well as I just posted it again in the side chat. Anybody wants to come on in, have a little combo, get things kicked off, and see where the night may take us. Depending on how things go tonight, probably do a little short. I'm planning on doing this for about an hour at the one-on-ones, and then after that, we'll jump over into a little more open group discussion. But like I said, we got a lot of good feedback about this concept of doing the one-on-one. So you see, we'll try it out on a regular basis. On a side note, for those of you who pay attention, Godzilla Freak was just mentioning this little aside. So today, Professor Wannabe Professor Dave, rolled out his rebuttal, part 1 to Dr. Tour's series. And let's just say he is all in on autocatalysis being something that Dr. Tour does not understand, number one. And I mean, he is just going full bore. He also made adamant claims that homochirality has been solved. And he quoted 2 papers, one from 2007, I believe, one from 2011 by Blackmond. But the genius forgot or just didn't look, I guess. I don't know. She published a paper in 2019 on the topic. So her papers from 2007, 2011 were discussing about like these hypotheticals, right? Like, oh, could it happen in these contexts? We think there might be potential in this arena for homochirality to happen. Fast forward to 2019, and it's still, well, nothing we've done so far has any remote plausibility in prebiotic environments. We actually haven't solved anything, and we're like, we figured out some ways to do different things, but none of this stuff is relevant in relation to origin of life research. So that's 2019. I think it was December of 2019. So, a little over a year ago, year and 5 months, I guess. And we've got Wannabe Dave going all in on this stuff. What I'm very fascinated to see, so on Friday, I believe, Wannabe Dave is going to be rolling out part 2, and I think part 2 is going to have some more in-depth stuff. But it looks like he managed to recruit Lee Cronin, and I think Gerald Joyce, and there was one other guy, I'm not sure who it was, to come and like give feedback. And from what he clipped out, it looks like they're going to be coming at Dr. Tour pretty hard. One of them even said, like, I would never come to James for a, any kind of review on this stuff, because he didn't know what he's talking about. And I think the guy who I think is Gerald Joyce, he was acting like, and this is a little clip that was in the first video, he was talking like, the water paradox and reductionism and everything reductionist reactions is not condensation reactions are not a big deal. Nothing we got to take care of. We don't have to worry about this. There's nothing to see here. And it'll be very interesting to see how that gets expanded. And so Wannabe Dave, man, he's coming full bore, all out, pedal to the metal, dropping insults left and right, being a complete jerk. And it will be very, very interesting to see how part 2 goes. Am I not getting audio? I just saw Dell says the sound's not working. Okay, let me. All right, tell me, let me know how audio is coming through. If you're being able to hear me better now. Didn't realize there was any kind of issue. Let me know what the problem is, guys. Is it is it volume low? Is it like jumping? Is it like getting static? What was going on there with the audio, folks? Let me know. I don't want to. Oh, looks like we got our first guest of the evening. And Godzilla Freak says he was talking about a different John. Gotcha. So, man, the one and only Otangelo is coming in to have a conversation. What's going on, Otangelo? How are you, my friend?
Fine, thanks. And you, John?
Hanging in there. So, were you in the audience this past couple nights when I've been doing these one-on-ones? Do you know how all this works?
Yes, I do. I saw your last stream, and I think it's a good format. I like one-to-one. It is not so crowded, and I think it's better to have conversations rather than people having to wait until it's their turn and so forth. So, good idea.
I appreciate it. All right, let's get this all kicked off. It is time for the first of the night, one-on-one. It's going to be starting right now with me and Otangelo. So, what's on your mind, my friend? How you been? I know I've seen you in action in some different streams lately.
Yeah, have you seen Professor Dave's stream and rebuttal to James Tour?
Oh yeah, I watched it in its entirety earlier today.
So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think he is all in, and he may be doubling down on something that's going to backfire on him, is what I think. I mean, for example, that little clip. Sidebar. Have you watched the whole thing as well, Otangelo?
I was starting to watch, and actually to comment, I watched, let me see here, up to 7 minutes, just up to 7 minutes, and I started actually to make a rebuttal in a written form, and I think he started so damn stupidly. It's staggering.
Well, I'll tell you something that really I found very interesting. So, in his little clip of his, I guess he interviewed Lee Cronin, and one of the things that Cronin is talking about, and that Dave uses as supposed, in favor of the autocatalysis and such, is Cronin's paper he was involved in on inorganic autocatalysis. And I'm like, so you're doing this with a metal? That seems I find that rather interesting that you're going to go all in on that and use something that's inorganic as your supposed explanation for something. It's like, so you're not even doing anything that's relevant to I'm talking from the actual elements being used, relevant to origin of life, but then claiming that this is evidence in favor of your position. Does that make sense?
Well, they try to use that explanation in regards to attempt to explain the origin of metabolism. So we know that in order to have metabolism, it is like an assembly line. And there you have to have various robots which work in joint venture together, and they receive a product, an intermediate product, and then they do a manufacturing step, each protein or robot, and they handle the product to the next protein or robot, and they do that 8-9 times, like in like for example to fix carbon. So of course, these proteins in the assembly line, they were not there prebiotically. So what do? They say, oh, it happened by catalytic metals. The problem is here, however, that This is too unspecific because these procedures, they are very, very specific. So that doesn't work. And the metabolism first explanation has simply been rejected. I can quote you here from Leslie Orgel. He writes, the implausibility of metabolic cycles on the prebiotic earth. He says, almost all proposals of hypothetical metabolic cycles have recognized that each of the steps involved must occur rapidly enough for the cycle to be useful in the time available for its operation. It is always assumed that this condition is met, but in no case have persuasive supporting arguments been presented. Why should one believe that an ensemble of minerals that are capable of catalyzing each of the many steps of the reverse citric acid cycle was present anywhere on the primitive Earth, or that the cycle mysteriously organized itself topographically on a metal sulfide surface? The lack of a supporting background in chemistry is even more evident in proposals that metabolic cycles can evolve to lifelike complexity. The most serious challenge to the proponents of metabolic cycle theories, the problems presented by the lack of specificity of most non-enzymatic catalysts, has in general not been appreciated. If it has been ignored. Theories of the origin of life based on metabolic cycles cannot be justified by the inadequacy of competing theories. They must stand on their own.
Yep. Well, it's kind of funny you talk about that, because one of the things that he tries to claim or rely on or kind of put forth as an explanation later on in the video is he goes back into the whole coevolution model, and on a very surface level, and it's pretty funny, man. So you'll appreciate this. So you know how Eugene Koonin wrote his 2009 paper on the genetic code, and and then he followed up and like did a, or it was 2007, I forget. Anyway, he did another 2007, I guess it was, because then he did another one in 2017, like a decade, like, hey, review back on his 2007 paper. And what was hilarious is the paper that Wannabe Dave references is the first version of it. And the ultimate irony is Koonin refers to the coevolution model, but then further down basically talks about its implausibility. But Wannabe Dave talks about the coevolution model as it's like an explanation, which I thought was priceless. And then, of course, but then the paper he's referencing further, like at the end, or close to the end, Koonin's like, yeah, this isn't really feasible. Continues to showcase my suspicions that Dave doesn't actually read much past the abstracts. What do you think about that?
Well, Eugene Koonin, he said the origin and evolution of the genetic code is an universal enigma. And there are basically three proposals. One is the stereochemical theory, the second is the coevolution theory, which you just mentioned, and the third is the error minimization theory. And the truth is that science has absolutely no clue at all. These are just ideas, but by closer examination, they do not withstand scrutiny. I mean, the origin of the genetic code is a major abiogenesis problem. It has not been solved, and Koonin basically acknowledged this. And more staggering than that is that the genetic code is optimal amongst millions and millions of different possible genetic codes. There are 10 to the 84th power of possible alternative codes, and the one which is used in life is optimized. So it is highly non-random. How do you explain that? It is amazing evidence of design.
Well, what's kind of funny about that too is in the video you'll come across this later on. He actually tries to make the claim that they've pretty much solved that and understand where the information can come from.
Well, I would say that are two different problems. I was today at Speed Stream, and people are very used actually to scramble these two things together. I would say that the origin of the genetic code is a huge unsolved problem. Why should there be a genetic code at all? And the second problem is, and it is an entirely different problem, is the origin of the information, is the sequence of the codons in the DNA, which bear information in order to assemble the amino acids in the right sequence to have functional proteins. This is an entirely different problem. It is the same as to ask how did the alphabet emerge, and then how did the words emerge, and then how did the sentences emerge which make sense. These are all different problems, and you require intelligence to make all these things.
Well, absolutely. And what's really funny is that it seems the vast majority of these individuals, even people who are in academia, are incredibly unknowledgeable in relation to, alphabet and then strings, extensions of the alphabet, how the syntax applies, and then where does semantics come into play, and pragmatics, and all these different layers of what information is, not just from a raw Shannon perspective, which I don't know if you heard me when this started, but right now, Pudding and the gang are over there trying to explain functional information and talking trash about me. And what's so funny about it right now is they're not even approaching the point from the right context, which is really cracking me up. I was listening to a portion of it right before this kicked off, and I was just cracking up listening to them. They're over there doing all this math and trying to come up with the probabilities and how many would be functional and all this stuff, and like trying to use that as the definition of functional information, and not even realizing that we're talking about, well, one of the things that's being discussed is the improbability, or how the improbability skyrockets when you're talking about functional information in relation to the total probability resources. It's it's just cracking me up how they're not it's like it's not computing the actual problem.
Well, first of all, you can make an analogy and regard the codons as words. First of all, how do you get words? How do you get the triplet unification of the nucleotides and 64 of them together? That would be the first question. Why should that be at all? And then the second one is, how do you join them into functional sentences, which would be the information which you require in order to have functional amino acid sequences? This is something which I cannot understand, like why people like Speed don't get this. I mean, they ridiculed me when I brought up a science paper which calculated the odds to have a 100 amino acid string in 1 to 10 to 130th power, which is more than the number of atoms in the universe, to have just a string of 100 amino acids. This basically ends the conversation. This alone, that evidence alone, ends the conversation, and people simply don't get it. And then that science paper, which I quoted from the Royal Society, was attempting to refute that and claiming that, it is not the entire string of protein which is functional, so it could be, the odds could be reduced to 1 to 10 to the 30th power. I mean, do you think about how huge that number is and how ridiculous it is to think that that solves the problem? I mean, there are 10 to the 22nd power of stars in the entire universe. And you think that the kind of odds is plausible to say oh, that makes it possible that proteins emerged by random shuffling. It's just crazy. These people do not think.
Yeah, it is getting rather obvious that there is a gigantic wall in the cognitive functions that they utilize that just is not. I can't tell if it's just willful suspension of the ability to think like this, or they recognize it and just reject it. I mean, to me, it's reaching such levels of, such extreme levels of incoherence in relation to actually being a rational attempt of an explanation versus the designer being the 100% most rational explanation. And not just from like, and the point I guess kind of one of the points I'm making is like, not just like, where's the code come from? It's like, is somebody impersonating Professor Dave, or is it actually Professor Dave here? See that, Otangelo? I am real, Professor John.
Okay.
Okay, I think that might be okay. I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna make an educated guess. I think that might be Jamie impersonating Professor Dave. That's what I think.
I want to respond to what you asked. What is the reason that people actually demonstrate that kind of cognitive dissonance? And I recently read a science paper on fine-tuning. And the author, he made a very succinct syllogism in regards of fine-tuning. And then at the end, he says, as someone who does not believe in metaphysical beings, I don't adhere to the solution of intelligent design. Throughout history, we have seen that more and more phenomena that were first being described as divine intervention made way to a natural physical explanation. I think it would be more likely that the fine-tuning problem can also be solved without invoking a metaphysical reality. But the difficulty of this problem should not be underestimated. If there is indeed a universal mathematical structure, as stated by Tegmark, then the fine-tuning problem should be explained by this theory. So why I am bringing that up? You see that this guy, he acknowledged the problem. And so science in general and scientists in general, they acknowledge that it is a huge problem to explain the origin of the genetic code and the information in DNA. But like this guy, he openly admits, as someone who does not believe in metaphysical beings, I don't adhere to the solution. So you start from the starting point that you have already made up your mind. These people, they have already made up their mind. They don't want to be a metaphysical reality. Therefore, a designer, even if it is the best explanation, cannot be brought into the picture. So it is rejected outhand and beforehand. So anything else, no matter how irrational and nonsensical, is adopted. And if there is no explanation yet, then okay, science is still working on the problem, but in the future it will be found, the solution will be discovered, and it will be a natural explanation without resorting to a design. Well, this is a perfect example of materialism of the gaps. We don't know yet, but in the future the explanation will be found and it will be natural.
Yeah. The term I use is mental gymnastics. I mean, it's reaching such levels. These guys are cracking me up. Keep lying for Jesus, checkmate. Okay, I wonder if this is, I don't think it's Professor Dave, but I'm not sure if that's somebody that's having fun, poking fun, or is joking on both sides. We'll see. And then George, I'm an unreal PhD. That's a good follow-up to wannabe Dave.
You should invite him to come in and actually defend his position. I mean, he made, just in the first seven minutes, so staggeringly stupid assertions. It's just unbelievable. Like here, for example, he starts, the origin of proteins, molecular machines, stays right at the core of the question of how life, oh, that's my reply. James does research on molecular machines which have nothing to do with biological systems and even less to do with abiogenesis. Wow, how stupid is that? The question of how proteins emerge prebiotically is right on the core about abiogenesis. I mean, you cannot have life without proteins here, so you have to explain how proteins emerged prebiotically. That is so basic.
Yeah, that is one of the things I found very interesting about the, him being like, autocatalysis just explains all this stuff. And it's like, did you miss the whole part where, like the multiple episodes where Dr. Tour was talking about how do you build the building blocks? Like, it's like Dave was still, his mind was still operating, like 15 layers above the point that Dr. Tour was making. Kind of, one of the foundational premises he was putting forth as a synthetic chemist. Like, guys, you're making all of these arguments and these assumptions and doing these experiments operating from the perspective that all of these things are accounted for. And they're not. Like, we know they're not. You should, if you don't know that they're not, then you're operating from an ignorance perspective. If you do know and you're still going forth acting like they're accounted for, then I don't know what to tell you. And I really wonder if, like I said, I'm so fascinated to see what happens on Friday when this when part 2 comes out. I really want to see how strong these researchers that Dave got to come help him out. I'm very interested to see how strong they go, because given the fact that at least, the 2 that I was able to identify are heavily involved in origin of life research. Do they have anything personal potentially on the line here? I don't think there would be any funding that might be questioned if they're not able to debunk what Tour is saying, It's like somebody's got to be thinking that. It's got to be an underlying component. But so we'll keep talking, folks. By the way, I just want to say thank you so much for Honest Angel for swinging by. I know she's got to go to bed. Thanks so much to everybody else who's coming in here. And folks, we're doing one-on-one conversations. I'm talking with Otangelo right now, but next person that jumps in, you will start the next round of interactions. It's the whole point of this. Last night we had a whole bunch of people coming in. Where is everybody? Come on, folks. I know you should have, at least, anybody who watched last night knows that I was being pretty calm, wasn't going off on people. We had some back and forth. We got attacked. People were leaving comments about like how calm I was, and they weren't even used to it. So, I mean, come on in, folks. The water is fine. Link is pinned. I'll post it again here in side chat if you want to come on in. But anyway, yeah, Otangelo, I think this stuff is when, I don't know, did you see those clips I was playing from that lecture at the very beginning of the stream?
No, I just saw you live, so I didn't see the first few minutes of your stream tonight.
Okay, so I'm gonna play a little clip here that you will appreciate.
And how does a living cell operate? These are the most amazing machines to me, because 1 makes 2, 2 make 4, and it does this all using elemental materials. Elemental. This is nanotechnology in action, doing things that our nanotechnologies, the one we've been building, can only dream of. And this has been happening for billions of years on this planet. Now, we know how it works, sort of. This is basic biology. You take a human, you pluck out a cell, you pull out its genome, there's its chromosomes, you unravel the chromosomes, you get a long string of DNA. DNA is transcribed into RNA, the working copy of the nucleic acids, which ultimately are translated into proteins, which build us and every living thing on this planet. Biology 101 in 2 seconds. This is the reason why I love biology, though. Biology is self-assembling nanotechnology with a built-in programming language. No other nanotechnology has this. This is really important. Now, we didn't know much about this code for a long time. I remember before, in the early 1980s, just to read a few hundred bases of genetic code was enough to get your PhD. But by 1990, the Human Genome Project had officially started up after about 5 or 6 years of behind-the-scenes wrangling and getting money and politics. And this project catalyzed an amazing shift in genomics that continues to this day. It went from doing DNA sequencing like this, using X-ray film and radioactive isotopes and reading DNA code by hand, to factories that churn out DNA 24/7 using robotic sequencers like these HiSeqs made by Illumina.
Yeah, I love that his definition of biology. Yeah, it's like, I mean, how many times have you and I used those words or very similar concepts, right? In relation to when we're arguing about biological systems and what's necessary, the underlying components, and the things that are having to be accounted for in the information that's necessary for these things to be actualized. And how often are we told by the folks the atheists we interact with on YouTube, how everything we're talking about actually isn't reality? But
No,
then
it's just chemistry. How many times have you heard when you ask about what happens in DNA? Oh, it's just chemistry.
Yeah. It's not technology. There's nothing about technology in here. I mean, that's just, it really, it blows me away, to be honest. Continuing to listen to those ongoing talking points that we get from and then the few that kind of recognize that it's tech, like a speed of pudding, then they still don't understand the significance of the point. And I don't get it. It really blows me away. Like to me, this stuff is so straightforward. Not in terms of the complexity, but I mean straightforward conceptually, right? But I don't understand how it's so difficult for people to comprehend.
Today, John, it was quite funny. I was at the site chat, and then I quoted from the science paper, which I put here in the private chat. It is a recent paper from 2020 March, a month ago about. And Levine, he writes, biology and computer science are not two different fields. They are both branches of information science working in distinct media with much in common. And then I put the link, and then immediately someone didn't realize that I was actually quoting from that science paper and thought that was my own assertion, and said, oh, prove it. And then I said, well, just go and read the science paper, which I am linking just below. And then the guy said, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand the sentence. And I was thinking, wow. I mean, you see, these guys, they have absolutely no clue about the issue which we are talking about.
No, it's very true. Very true. I mean, I'm gonna read. I'm looking at this paper right now as you were talking. There's a bunch of nice little nuggets in this one, and it looks like they even go into Turing machines. Well, that's awesome. I'll definitely have to read this.
Yeah, and I mean, Michael Levine is a very, very good scientist, but he is bound to evolution, to naturalism. So you will see how he tries. Basically, the purpose of the paper is to deny that intelligence is required. He tries to explain everything through evolution. So, I mean, it's really interesting that guys of this caliber, which have such an amazing insight in biology, cannot see the reality that biology is basically about information, and information just can only come from intelligence. I mean, this is people are brainwashed into that religion of evolution.
Well, I definitely agree with that. And Brian F has a super chat. Thank you, Brian. Says, would it be considered observable evidence that when humans obey God, life is better, and when we disobey, it gets ugly fast? To me, it's clear, all caps, as day. I mean, Brian, I would say that from a macro point of view, everything you just said is 100% true. I think very often when there's negatives that occur, even if they're like short term and such, people like to cling to those, or something unexplained, if something bad happens to somebody. How could a just God, I'll do this to somebody who's living right, and all those ongoing talking points. And one of the things I talk about on a regular basis is, we have our own general and special relativity, right? And I don't mean that from a physics perspective. I mean it from a consciousness and our life. And we view everything from, generally, we're viewing everything from, our frame of existence, and it's a finite frame. And in the heat of the moment, things can seem horrific or just overwhelming, and how are we going to deal with this? And the stress is just astronomical, and I don't know how I could ever do this, and what did I do to deserve this? And if there is a God, why would I was doing the right thing? Why would I have to go through all, those kind of things, right? Or on the flip side, it's, man, I probably deserve this because, I was doing a bunch of bad stuff. But if God is love, then even though I was being a bad kid, then it shouldn't be going this far, should it? And to me, what I find very interesting is, just like when we were children, whatever we were going through at that given moment was the worst thing we'd ever experienced because we hadn't experienced it before. And in that moment, from our relative perspective, it didn't, how could this be, right? However, when you get a little bit older, and it's oftentimes not that much older, it could be, 10 minutes later, you realize that it was not that big of a deal. Think about all the times a kid, something bad's happened, they start crying their eyes out, and then the parent shows up and, explains everything's going to be okay. And then presto, everything's fine, right? Or, when you're a little bit older and you fell off your bike for the first time, cut your leg open, and you cried. Oh, it's horrible. You'd never crashed a bicycle before. And then, fast forward a decade, you look back and you crack up and you get a good chuckle out of, man, I can't believe I got so overwhelmed and so worked up when I fell off my bike for the first time. I think the same thing applies in all of these things. And I'm not saying this is the answer to the problem of evil and all this, which is obviously one of the favorite arguments for the atheists. However, I do think that a gigantic portion of what people try to claim as part of the problem of evil can easily be explained through the relative perspective. And I don't know, Otangelo, I've been running my mouth. I don't know if that what I was saying made sense to you, but that's something I feel pretty strongly about as I get older. And I look back on these things, it's like, yep, I used to get really worked up about stuff, thought it was horrible, look back on it, chuckle. And then when I try to apply the eternal lens, or am I actually immortal? If so, then is my reaction dramatically exacerbated by the fact that I currently view things from a finite frame. That's just my thoughts there. Oh, man, more super stickers from Ramen. Much appreciated. Uh-oh. Jamie's getting in the super sticker action, too. For those of you who didn't see it the other night, there was a very entertaining super sticker battle between Jamie and Ramen over on SFT's channel. I think that I think Ramen won that one, but it was some good stuff. All right, folks. So anybody who wants to come on in to the one-on-one discussion, link is pinned at the top. Come on in if you want to have a little talk, a little one-on-one, a little back and forth, a little see what's going on, what we all think. But yeah, I think in the next, what do you think, Otangelo, next week, how many responses to the Wannabe Dave videos you think there's going to be next week?
I don't know.
I'm betting there will be quite a few.
I would like just to add something to the question of Brian. I will quote Jeffrey Dahmer. He said, if a person doesn't think there is a God to be accountable to, then what's the point of trying to modify your behavior to keep it within acceptable ranges? That's how I thought anyway. I always believed the theory of evolution as truth, that we all just came from the slime. When we died, that was it. There is nothing. So this is, I think, he brought it straight up to the point. As soon as you think there is no God, then basically, as soon as you have the opportunity to do something which you know is wrong, but which benefits you somehow, the threshold to go for it is much lower than when you know that there is a God to which you are accountable. So I think that's why secular morality fails.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Yeah, it really is interesting to me the level of blinders that are required to maintain any kind of even remotely coherent logic for the atheist worldview. Like, they keep claiming to have come up with all these things, and they act like we're the ones operating from this, just incredibly crumbling and weak position. And I'm like, as every day goes by, the evidence is getting greater and greater in my favor, and it's really amazing. Oh man, here we go with the standard stupid. I missed the entire point from Red Barrel Rider. Can I sleep better knowing the theists in here would still think murder and other things are wrong, even if it turns out no gods exist? Or should I worry? I mean, those kinds of comments just, it's like they don't even want to think about things rationally.
Well, it's wrong based on what moral standard? If there is no God which sets the ought to be's, which sets the standard and what is okay and what is not okay, then based on what standard do you say that murder someone is wrong? I mean, it is just opinion against opinion. If a tribe in Papua New Guinea thinks that killing and cannibalizing the neighboring tribe is okay, so that's their moral standard. Who are we to say they are wrong? It's just a different opinion and a different social evolution of their moral standard, which they think is okay. If there is no God, then there is nothing above us. So it's just our moral behavior of our modern society against theirs. There cannot be moral standards at all if there is no God which says what is right and what is wrong. So
that's very true. That is very true. Oh, look here, we've got Jamie Russell's coming in. So Otangelo, I gotta ask you to step out because we got our next person has arrived for a one-on-one. Greatly appreciate your conversation, brother, and you're always welcome to come back in after we're done with Jamie.
All right.
Everybody give
All right.
Otangelo a big round of
Bye-bye.
applause. Thank you, Otangelo, for joining us. Great conversation. Much appreciated. And here we go. Now we've got the one and only Jamie Russell. What's going on, man? How are you?
Dirty, tired.
You say you're tired?
Yeah, more yard work. But I was curious what you think the best way to look at. You ever heard the argument about salt in the ocean rising every year?
Yes, I have.
So what do you think? Would you say is that? I'm a little unclear on just logically speaking here. Like what? How would you try to formulate that if you were trying to show how that works on an older, ancient Earth?
You talking about the salt problem or the?
Yeah. Like the salt's rising, right? So what would they even try to posit? I don't even remember how they even try to answer this. So I was just, if you could look at it a couple ways. You could look at it like, well, are you going to look, because you can't have like negative salt in the ocean, right? So it can only go back to being fresh. And so if you apply uniformitarianism, I guess it would be problematic with the rate of rise, right? Or would it equalize or what?
I know there's multiple different models, and one of them it's like, oh, it hasn't always been at that rate. To be honest, I think for the most part, it just gets ignored overall. Yeah. You're like, oh yeah, we recognize this is a problem, and then here's a few, hypothetical solutions, and then let's just move on.
Perhaps there's an argument there for like take some of the key uniformitarian ideas and then how they answer. I mean, if you looked at a variety of things where they propose these mechanisms for different ways that geography is what it is today, and then to the way they have to get around certain problems or whatever. And I think if you could look at multiple at the same time and they're not compatible, like in severe ways, I would say, because you need like massive erosion. Or how does that, how would that not occur? Even the slowest rates are like 1 millimeter per 1,000 years on like solid granite with low, rain or whatever, I think. And so even at that rate, you're talking, massive erosion that would eat seems to me would take care of all the geologic column, uprise and deposition. And if there's all this deposition, randomly happening with uprise, it seems like, that would be problematic because of how flat the layers are or whatever.
Right.
So how you describe that? I don't know. Just spitballing, man. Something on my mind.
Oh, for sure. Let me see. I'm pulling. Let me see what this says. Okay.
I need to get like your. Do you have a thing where you guys put papers and stuff? I need to be looking at that stuff. Do you have like a drive folder or something?
Yes, I do. Hang on a second. Gotta plug in my computer here. Yeah, you know I do, man.
I know. I just don't remember how to get to it.
You just go to on my about page. There's a link that says "For the Annoying People."
Okay, yeah.
And it comes right up there.
I have looked at it. I'm just being retarded, I guess. I have been to it. I just need to go back to it again.
Let's see. I'm trying to pull up some stuff. This doesn't really answer why it's. So I found something on USD.edu that claims that the argument we're putting forth is not valid, but doesn't really give a reason as to why it's not valid. Let's see here.
Well, like if you think about it, like what do they say when you point out the fossils on the top of a mountain or whatever, right? They just say uplift. But if the column can be uplifted and existing, wouldn't there be erosion, especially on those parts? So how would that still last? Uplift can't explain because if it's rising from the bottom and then eroding from the top, and then obviously it's not equal everywhere, but you'd think on places where it's risen more, it would have more erosion present. It just seems actually like a defeater to me. In my mind, I can't think of how you could possibly even and I've heard geologists say, yeah, it's just kind of like a running model. We know it doesn't work like straight up. But it's just like a general idea, and so they just can kind of float nebulously with that notion, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So this is cracking me up, man. So I've now gone to 3 different things that are like addressing the issue. None of them have addressed the issue yet. They've just whined and like complained about the question even being posed and how it just ignores the scientific data. And it's like, okay, well, what's your counter?
Yeah.
Nothing. Let's see.
And it seems
now I'm over on Scientific American. Let's see. Keep talking. I'm looking through this stuff real quick.
Well, I was just thinking, like, because they admit that, like, at least I forget which layer it is, but that pretty much the whole Earth was underwater, at least large or most portions of it at one time. Like, especially in one of the layers, I forget which one it is. One of the lower ones, I think, maybe, but like where shallow ocean type of thing. I just wonder how if the geologic column's preserved and there's like no erosion somehow, but even if we just take the lowest rates, it just seem to be detrimental, because like the amount of deposition it would just seem off the top of my head you'd need would be like, where are you getting the Earth is growing or something from space dust? I mean, how do you preserve the in the river deltas and stuff? All that seems like just totally impossible to explain with deep time. Makes sense that they saw processes happening when they're first developing geology, but it seems like from what we now know, it seems like that's should at least be taken more seriously, I guess. I don't know. I think they're just scared of religious zealots taking over the government or something.
Right. True. Okay, so still not, I mean, they're saying different stuff like, oh, there's not as much coming in now, but in the past, before like metropolitan areas and all that kind of stuff, didn't really lower it by that much. They've made the uniformitarian. Oh, this is all based on the assumption of a uniformitarian.
Right, of course.
Like, oh, so you want to rely on uniformitarianism for everything else.
It seems to me that this is a known issue. To those who know, like, they'll admit that. I mean, there's issues for young Earth creationism too, but do you ever hear an answer for I thought one of the best arguments against young Earth and geology is the things they talk about for the dinosaur egg nests seeming to be like preserved really well. Have you heard that?
I haven't, but hang on one second. Okay, so I just reached in. Okay, so this is the age of the ocean as determined by UTS salt content. Scientific American. It's an old article. Okay, so he says, what was the conclusion here? Becker's conclusions are fairly accordant with the results derived from physical, astronomical, and paleontological evidence, although the study of radioactivity among minerals has led to much higher figures for the age of the Earth. It seems, however, that the rate of chemical erosion offers a more tangible and definite mode of attack upon the problem of geologic time. The problem cannot be regarded as definitely solved, however, until all available methods of estimation shall have converged to one common conclusion. But right above that, he says that
that's funny. Until we can come up with a way that it all works out together, so we can say that we weren't biased in our interpretation or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So right above that, from considerations of this order, Becker has developed an equation representing the supply of sodium to the ocean during past time by a descending exponential, and has shown that the age of the ocean, as deduced from the data already given, must lie somewhere between 50 and 70 million years. The higher figure, he thinks, is closer to the truth than the lower one. If the ocean was initially saline, the estimates of its age would be still further reduced.
Right.
Interesting.
But that's a problem for them too. The question about, they give us that problem, like, how do you have freshwater and saltwater animals mixing together, which is a good question. But I think there's studies have shown how that can work, and how the speciation on the within a kind can develop. The ones that can manage to survive can slowly or I don't know. I don't even know. Maybe they were more robust in the past as well. When we see animals, like, because they have like a extra organ, I think, a lot of fish, and so you can see that in freshwater fish for processing the salt, I guess, in the water. And a lot of the fish that are actually freshwater seem to have a shriveled version of that, and then vice versa. So you could see how they're just like a animal might lose its eyes or whatever because it lives in a cave or whatever. Same kind of thing going on, I would say.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I mean, like kind of what you were saying there has been proven that there are many fish that can do both. Either can do both, or they they get sick, they get weak for a period of time, but then they're able to the way that component you're one of the things like the component you're referring to get kind of switched back on.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Get things going again, and then they're able to adapt and operate. And that's the really thing. One of the things I find very interesting about a lot of these interactions that we have with the evolution advocates. It's like they seem, so many of them, not all, but so many of them seem to operate from this perspective that these people like myself are 150,000% against the entire concept of adaptation. And it's like, no, the core, I'm 100% in on the premise of adaptation. It's just how is the adaptation possible?
Right.
And how is it accomplished is the key differentiator. And when I try to explain it to them, it's like they've just turned off all semblance of.
Are you talking about evolutionists or the some creationists? Because I've seen that from creationists who like just want to outright say evolution. Like, I don't even know what they mean sometimes. Like, so I usually say like I accept evolution on just I don't accept universal common ancestry or major kind changes, but it's clearly like I don't know. I just think it's easier to not deny just say evolution is just totally false 100% every aspect of it. I just think that isn't helpful, but everybody has their own way of thinking.
Well, here's one of the major problems and all that is the vast majority of at least the individuals on YouTube, the YouTube Evo atheists, as I call them, the vast majority of them don't comprehend or like lack the knowledge of the separation points in terms of what is required for adaptation versus full new body plan, like new types of organisms.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, we're talking about the orders of magnitude that are being discussed. I mean, are so astronomical. They're almost incomprehensible to the human mind. I would say they arguably are incomprehensible to the human mind when they're true, would have to be accounted for. Right. And, last week, I I was using the whole, I pulled up like ESPN.com and like was screen sharing the tab and showing like what happened if I shrunk the window and how like things would disappear, like different functions. The UI would restructure itself based on the screen size. And that is what's happening in a lot of the vast majority of the instances of adaptation, right? Quote unquote adaptation. It's repurposing or activation or interactivation of pre-existing functionality. And it's like, just because something was turned off doesn't mean it didn't exist. And now because there's a need for it, it's turned on.
Yeah.
Yes, adaptation happened. I agree. But not in the way that you think it did.
Exactly.
It wasn't evolution from the new thing came out of nowhere due to environmental pressures and mutations, all this kind of, like, no, that's not what happened. That is not what happened.
What do you think about orchids, like those orchids that seem to mimic insect the way have you seen those cool orchid flowers that seem to have some sort of developmental, I mean, I would think if you haven't seen them you should look it up. It's amazing. Because to draw the insects, for pollination or whatever.
Yeah.
Some of them are uncanny, and like some of them look like monkeys and like look like faces. Like maybe that's pareidolia or whatever you call it, but it seems like there's some more to that. And so I would suspect that not all of those were created kinds in the beginning, but I could be wrong. But but then that would require some kind of explanation, and because there's like I think I find really interesting. You have someone waiting?
No, you're good.
Okay, like I think some of the best things that creationists should tackle in like biology and botany, besides that, is like parasites. I think those are would be a good route to go to explain, because I've heard that some of those, like a lot of barnacles and stuff, are like they're actually like crabs that have just had like a massive amount of things turned off in their genes, and they've actually taken them and like managed to flip them back on, and they have a new body plan and stuff that comes back. Like for a barnacle or whatever is like some kind of small crab or something. Maybe just a barnacle is that. I don't know. I forget. Or just any kind of parasite where they literally just turn off all their stuff to like just meagerly survive off by like living in the stomach. It's kind of fascinating. And those kind of stories I think are intriguing, and we should be exploring that, not be afraid to explore everything. And it's hard to understand what some of these carnivores were originally, but it's interesting how if you look at an animal that doesn't eat meat and like pictures of them, and then say look at something that eat like an omnivore, and then to like say like a predator, like an eagle or something, and then down to a hyena or a other what do you call those ones that eat dead things?
You're talking about like scavengers in general, or
as they eat more and more meat as a diet, and then it gets even worse where they eat dead things. Like you can see them actually, these animals look like just clearly like not like how they originally were probably made. Like a vulture or hyenas are really quite ugly. I mean, they don't have to be, but I'm just saying, like, as they eat more and more meat and then move towards eating the dead animals, they kind of get more funky looking. If you look at like a hawk or an eagle, they look really stern. I don't know. Maybe I'm just retarded, but it seems kind of interesting.
I would definitely agree with you on that. And one more thing, and then we've got Brian F. is backstage. Cool. He'll be coming up next. But to your point on the variation changes and such, like for orchids and the visual component changes, I think something that people forget about, and I often wonder if a lot of the, let's just say, older generations who, like a pudding brain, for example, who don't think that these things are remotely feasible, right? If it's actually like not really code and all that kind of stuff, right? I'm like, so with like web technology now and mobile apps and other things do this too, but like based on information that is sent, whether it be from cookies or just browser information, different demographic information that's saved, people write scripts all the time that change what is displayed for you individually, right? 15 years ago, like even less than a decade ago, the technology existed in some cases, but like the vast majority of like a website, for example, everybody saw the exact same thing and that's it. Like there was one version, period, right? Then mobile versions started to come into play, and then as analytics and cookie technology and all that kind of stuff was expanded, you had a growth and the opportunity to create things much more dynamic. And now you can be changing visuals, you can change colors, you can change what's displayed to each individual person, put them on different pathways, both from just a general UI perspective as well as the the overall course you're trying to send them through based on external information and variable input, variable output, and they can be pre-programmed. And this is the kind of thing that we're talking about, except just in biological systems, it's exponentially more advanced. But Brian, welcome to the stream. How are you doing? What brings you? Have we interacted on a stream before? I forget.
No.
All right. Well,
All
right. Well, I'm getting the clock started. Are you atheist, theist, agnostic? Theist. Awesome. Well, what? Appreciate you joining the stream. What's on your mind? What'd you like to talk about?
So I was the one that asked you about if everybody obeyed God, would the world be a better place? And like I was reading the Bible for 3 months, asking tons of questions and praying. And after 3 months, like God gave me a full blown revelation. It's hard to explain, but it's like everything in me knew that all my problems in life were a result of not obeying the God of the Bible. So then that opened me up to start reading more and doing what God commands. And then it got really real to me. So like my question was basically, like, if everybody obeyed God tomorrow, we would live in like a beautiful world. And isn't that like scientific? Like, can't we break through? Like, part of the way how I see God is like as a parent to a kid. Like, the kids don't know what's better, so the parents like guide the kid, tell them, no, don't do this. Like, sex outside of marriage, like the fruit of that is just bad. Like single parent homes, disease, you can die from it. And it's like God gave us commands as a whole for all of us, and they're all for the good of all of us. Like, don't be prideful, don't steal, don't kill. Like, everything that God commands us to do is for our good and for the good of all humanity, isn't it?
No, I mean, I'd agree with you completely. I mean, that's kind of the point, right, of the fall of man, and it's one of the reasons I get the problem of evil and the escape mechanism that it's used as by so many of the atheists, right? It's you do realize that the point you were making, right, is the vast majority of all the things that you're like complaining about are the direct results of the actions of humans. And then you're like, well, if God actually exists and was morally good and just and everything, he wouldn't have let us be able to be bad. It's like, so you're going to blame God for all the bad stuff happening because he let you be bad. Okay. Yeah. Got it. But to your bigger picture point of, would all things be good if we just followed the rules? It's like, yep, pretty much. Because it's one of the interesting things that we, like, case in point, you brought up like sex, right? So case in point, there are studies that have been coming out that the more sex partners you have, your probabilities of like cancers and different diseases go through the roof. And it's not like, oh, you got it directly from the sex act, right? It's just turns out that actually some of it does in some cases, but they're now being able to quantify it. I mean, like, okay, we're seeing with these particular diseases, even it wasn't like, I'm not talking about like an STD, I'm talking about other stuff. Based on how many sex partners people have had, here is the probability of them having XYZ disease or getting it later in life. And it's kind of one of those, in my opinion, it's one of those factors of, and God said, don't run around banging everything that moves. There's bad stuff that'll happen. It's like, oh wait, turns out that's one. And of course, your point about, collapsed home, just the emotional issues. And, as somebody who went down that rabbit hole, I'm in no way, shape, form, or fashion somebody that operates from a holier than thou, haven't been there, done that perspective, right? But looking back on it, I recognize that it was all well and good. It was loads of fun at the time. But from the big picture perspective, when I look back on it, and I recognize, it's very easy to recognize, like, oh, well, that was dumb, and that was dumb. And think about all the crap I dealt with from that ramification, and, the shattered relationships, the emotional upheaval, the drama, the long tail ramifications from X, Y, and Z. And I could have avoided all that, And but on the atheist side, it's like, oh, we should do whatever we want and just be out and doing the stuff. And it's like, hey, if you want to, fine. I'm not going to judge you. But when the bad stuff happens, don't blame it on somebody else. It's your own actions that are being, bringing the negative ramifications.
Yeah, Yeah, and I tried like talking with other atheists about it, and they'll be like, God commanded you to own slaves. And it was like, God never commanded all of us as a whole to own slaves. Like they always come with side arguments that have nothing to do with what God commanded us as a whole to do. Like I know one atheist buddy, and he believes that it is a book of good morals. But he's like, he just thinks that man made it. But I don't know what it is with me. I just see it so clearly that God gave us commands as a whole for the good of humanity. And it's, to me, that's like scientific. I've never heard any debates on it, though. Have you heard like just strictly on if God's commands for us are actually good?
I don't know if I've heard a debate from like that exact context. I mean, a lot of debates on, God being the source of objective morals and objective moral truth versus subjective and all those kind of things. I don't think I've heard as many, or I think people have touched on it, but I don't know if it's been like the actual focus of, not only these are the standards and the rules put up, but here's like real justification for why they make sense and why they are good versus just being some arbitrary rules. And to be honest, I think it's one of the things that I've kind of identified with a lot of the atheists of, they want to act like, why would, who is God to put these rules on me? And it's like, a lot of times they sound like little rebellious, like adolescents, right? I don't understand why Dad doesn't want me to get drunk and drive. Like, I'm fine, that kind of thing. Why don't my parents just let me do whatever the heck I want to do? They're just mean. Versus like, yeah, as a parent, I don't want you to die from, a DUI or get arrested, or, I don't want you hanging out with, the local criminals, because I would prefer you not to commit crime and potentially get arrested than have your life ruined by a criminal record, all those kind of things, right? And but I kind of alluded to this earlier of the whole relativity of perspective and how at the moment it seems unreasonable. Why would God allow this to happen? And then you look back on it and it's like, oh, that's why. But I think a lot of times it also puts into context kind of the point you were making of, if we had just followed the rules, how awesome could things be? And it's kind of the irony of the fall of man, right? From committing the original sin and everything. Like that was in play, and now it's not. And to me, I was actually thinking about this, what I'm about to say earlier today, in relation to like all the discoveries of technology and our still early stage but rapidly growing knowledge of physics and chemistry and just all these things can be interacted, and nanotech and things can be done on the molecular level and all those kind of things. And I'm just like, man, if we were immortal, think of all the things that could have been discovered by now, and where we would be off like touring the cosmos versus being trapped in 70 years of finite mortal coil and then having to shuffle off. I don't know, I find it interesting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, cool. Yeah, I was gonna see if you knew of any other like debates or like good books on that topic. I don't hear it ever, and for me, that's how like I got saved, was just realizing all my problems in life were a result of not obeying. Like I have 2 kids out of wedlock. I got saved and then walked in purity and got married and have a new family now. But to me, it's just so clear as day.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you, man. I follow where you're coming from. Trust me, I get it. I know what you mean. I would say one. It's not directly on it, but I would read On Guard, which is William Lane Craig. I'm actually reading that one right now, And have you ever read Mere Christianity from C.S. Lewis?
No.
That's another good. It's not focused entirely on what you're talking about, but it touches on those kind of things. Works on.
Sorry, what was the first one called?
First one is On Guard,
On Guard.
by William Lane Craig, and then Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis.
Cool.
Right on, man. Well, great talking with you. We got Graham up next. You're welcome to come on anytime, and appreciate it. We'll love to do this again, man.
Thanks. Keep up the good fight.
Appreciate
Bye.
it. You too. What's up, Graham? How you doing? I saw you've been having a little problem with the overlords of YT, huh?
The overlords, yes. Calling me out for questioning who. We won't say who, but yes. And I don't even remember doing it. I've sent an appeal in saying, where did I question them? Anyway.
Well, at this point, I've kind of given up on any kind of rational. I mean, I assume at some point in your life you have read 1984.
Yes. Yep. Read it in high school and Animal Farm.
We live in that world now.
Yep.
And the politispeak and the groupthink and the rewrite of all that is rational from not that long ago. I mean, at this point, we have rewritten what was normal less than a year ago.
Yes.
And
it's happened very quickly.
I mean, we're in such a state of weirdness that things aren't surprising me anymore, to be honest. And I don't mean that from a just being apathetic perspective. I mean from a okay, I've known this potential for quite some time, and I have pontificated about it for years. Of this is the objective. This is where things are heading. It's inevitable. There's no other logical conclusion, and this being the objective is clearly delineated in a variety of publications going back 100 years. No, which tactic they're going to use has shifted, and different things have been put forth, but the end outcome has been clearly stated. And we've got people living in these little bubbles who are like, how did this happen? How could this be going on? This doesn't make any sense. I'm like, well, they wrote it down. Yes, It does. It makes total sense.
And we've also got the recent admission, I can't remember how long ago it was, a couple of weeks or months ago, by Klaus Schwab, that we will own nothing and be happy.
Yeah.
We will be their slaves, and we will have absolutely nothing. And I suspect that if we're not happy, we'll be dealt with. It's not that you'll be happy because everything's wonderful. That's the subtext there. Is you'll be happy because we told you to be.
Yeah, anybody that doesn't think that that's on the horizon is losing. I mean, for case in point, so I remember back 09, 010, and from then on, I have railed about the long tail ramifications of the quantitative easing that's been being done around the globe, but just the levels being executed inside the United States are just so mind-blowing. And I mean, case in point, I think the United States national debt was I want to say it was 14 trillion when Obama came into office. And it had been 9 when, I think it was 8.5, 9, somewhere around there when Bush came into office, right? Then it's 14 when Obama comes in. We were at 20, we were 19, either 19 or maybe 20. I think we were right at 20 when Trump took office. We're now at 29 trillion in debt. And that level of debt is just nuts. But then the quantitative easing that's been done by the Fed and the Central Bank of Europe and the other ones, like, it's just like, can't even contemplate this, right? Like, so like now the recognized, it freely admitted unfunded liabilities for the United States is 120 trillion. And to put it in context, our debt to GDP ratio is now greater than what Greece, their debt to GDP ratio was before they had their collapse, like 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it was.
Yep.
And it's like, and then you look at all the moves that have been being made by China and Russia for the last decade. They've been pushing and pushing and pushing, trying to get the dollar removed as the global reserve currency and having oil price in petrodollars.
Yeah.
And I know you know this, but for the audience, like the second the US dollar is removed as the primary reserve currency, and it's and specifically the petrodollar assignment. As soon as that's changed, the United States immediately experiences hyperinflation.
Yep.
Immediately. There's no way around it.
Yep.
And the irony is that, like, a couple days ago, Warren Buffett came out and basically like, yo, well, I'm highly expecting, high inflation increases. And a couple other big names have started coming out like, oh yeah, inflation's coming. And it's like, yeah, no kidding. Congratulations. You guys are like finance geniuses. And you're like, oh, well, we think that inflation might be happening. Really? I mean, we blew through $6 trillion in less than 9 months. And now we got another $3 trillion in deficit that's about to come into play. Like, you don't think that there's going to be inflationary problems with that? Come on.
Yeah.
Anyway, I go off on tangents about that stuff.
But Jesus is coming back. Make sure everyone knows the gospel. Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, and he was buried and he rose again according to the scriptures. Make sure you trust in Jesus, whether you've become a Christian yet or not. That's our hope. Our hope is not in this world. All of this is going to burn. It's going to pass away.
Well, that's very true. What Brian and I were talking about before you came on. It's kind of the being able to achieve that idyllic concept that he was talking about of like how the world would be if we just followed God's rules, right? The irony is in God's plan. The irony is like it will come to the point of quite literally, not figuratively, having to erase the grand experiment, right? And be like, we're going to start over again. Of make it how good things could have been, right?
So how much longer are you planning to be streaming for with this one?
I don't know. Maybe it might go another 30 minutes.
Depends how many people join you, probably.
Yeah, this whole concept is it's kind of fun, to be honest. Like it's kind of intriguing, just a little bit different vibe. Yeah, I'm doing a lot of the after. Yeah, I mean the after shows are fun, but and I obviously will continue to do those. It's good entertainment. But what really kind of connects me about the after shows is all the haters blame me for what everybody says, which I got a huge chuckle out of. Like, oh, people were just being so mean, blah 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 blah. LPP evil. I'm like, so it wasn't me. You're like whining about what somebody else did, and then it's my fault, even though I usually try to keep things in relatively organized, at least for a while, until degenerates into the madhouse late night. But that's kind of an inevitable deal. But people like to complain about it. It's somehow my fault.
Yep. I've just returned from traveling over 2,000 miles in each direction, from where I live to the capital city of my state. So I've been offline for about 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Yeah, I hadn't seen you in a while.
Yeah, and then I get back and I'm immediately on a ban. And it's like, oh, come on. I was so looking forward to coming home and live streaming again.
So you got a new channel set up?
Yeah. So I've set up a new channel for all those who are listening, and I'm just going to post that in the chat again. If anyone wants to connect to me over there. I can't live stream on that one. You can't go straight into live streaming. You've got to sit it out for 24 hours, I think it is, when you set up a new channel. So I might set up a few new channels that are ready to live stream in case this one gets banned. Yeah.
Well, you've got to make sure to keep all the overlords happy.
Yeah, I'm trying to find an alternative, but it's not easy. I've already paid for StreamYard, and StreamYard only links to YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn. And you can set it up to link to Vimeo and some others, but most of the...
I'm pretty sure you can do Twitch as well.
Twitch, yes, I can do Twitch. I'd never heard of Twitch before, but I saw that yesterday, so I might look into that one. But all the free speech channels, they pretty much expect you to pay to be able to live stream, and I've already paid StreamYard. Anyway, that's life.
I hope that like Rumble, I hope they roll out a live stream feature. I know I saw an interview with their CEO and that they're like planning on it, they're working on it, but I mean, there's a lot of logistics that has to go into that, a heck of a lot of resources and infrastructure they have to have on the back end to be able to handle that. And, for a startup, I mean, Rumble is still in startup phase. They don't have the tech, they don't have the dev support, and, they just don't have the resources, the human capital resources to be able to handle all that right now.
Yeah.
And the funding and everything else. But I mean, if they pull that off, I'll put it this way: I think some billionaires come in and is starting to back them. So if they're able to get the necessary capital they need for that and are able to roll out a live stream feature, I think Rumble would be able to start giving YouTube much more of a challenge. But until that happens, I mean, live stream has just become such a intricate part of the video world these days that I mean, it's weird. Like, I find myself, I'm very pissed off at YouTube on the mobile app, at least for the Android version, where they've made like getting to the filters tab, like they've added an extra step into it and put it in. Like, they changed the UI. It's very annoying. Anyway, because I've almost always I'm like, oh, I'm gonna see if anything's live. Like, I put in a couple keywords and I click live, and I like open up the tab and then open up the filters and then click the live tag, and no, there's nothing live. Yeah, okay. And then I'll start thinking about something else, and I think that's I'm assuming that's probably also a rapidly growing, demand by a lot of other people.
Yeah. But I can understand from their point of view the resource difficulties. But yeah.
Yep. Well, Graham, I greatly appreciate you coming on. We got looks like Richard Mazdin's coming up next. Thank you.
Excellent.
I'm glad you made it back safe from your travels, and hopefully you'll be able to give everybody. Make sure you click the link that Graham posted in the side chat. Go sub to his new channel and let us know when you get back into the live stream game, my friend.
Thanks, mate. Catch you around.
All right, have a good night.
See ya.
All right, here we go. Coming up next, what's up? Richard, how are you tonight, my friend?
Peace and respect. Up is the direction opposite the core of the planet, sir. Could you ask a harder question, please?
Well, I think the world might not necessarily have an up.
That's what I mean. It's just opposite the core of the planet.
So you're saying it's all relative?
Oh, yeah. It's just depending on where you're standing. I mean, if I point up, according to somebody in Australia, I'm pointing down, right? I mean, if it's not a coin.
Well, what about if we have a ice wall?
If we have an ice wall, gosh, I don't know. I guess then up is universal to the whole planet, I guess. I don't know. How does that work with the ice wall thing?
I have no idea. Man,
I want a cool accent. I don't have a cool accent. That sucks.
Well, I'll tell you this much, man. So the whole accent thing. So I'm an American who grew up in England, right? And it was weird when people always ask me, like, why don't you have an English accent? All this kind of stuff, right? Because I was born there. I lived there until I was 18.
Okay.
Now, my parents are American. I grew up around Americans on a military base, but I mean, like, I would go off. I lived off base, and so I mean, I lived in a village, and everybody that surrounded me was English, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
theoretically, since I was born and raised there, I should have some semblance of an English accent, right?
Can you fake one?
I could. I mean, I still can to an extent, but like when I was growing up, I could switch back and forth like nothing. It was easy,
Right.
and I was around it all the time. Now, if I do it, which is very rare, if I do it, I catch myself. I can hear myself sounding like an American trying to sound English, versus actually being able to speak like it, right?
Right.
And it's pretty funny. A lot of times Americans like can't pick up on it. They'll be like, "You sounded just so English." I mean, and I'm like, "Yeah, but I heard
You sounded
myself
just like every movie in my imagination. That was amazing.
Oh yeah, it was great. Let's just say I may have pulled some shenanigans with an English accent when I was younger. But anyway,
Right.
where was I going with all this? Okay, so yeah, one of the other reasons, as I got older, that there was no incentive for me to sound English and develop an English accent was when I was growing up, sounding American in England or in Europe in general was cool.
Yeah.
It was like the reciprocal of how Americans act, right? About it, in English or whatever the accent is. Like, it's just different. It's unique. But the interesting thing is, after 9/11, that changed abruptly.
How? I don't.
Well, I'll put it in context. So, I had gone off to college and came back. My first trip back post 9/11. I was down in London, and we were going to go on the Millennium Wheel, and so we're like right across the Thames River from Houses of Parliament, and there's the Millennium Wheel, and then next to that in this huge building is at the time anyway, it was the world's largest McDonald's. Right, it's been this huge building. It's like
that must be impressive to see.
It's multiple stories, right? And I mean like 5 or 6 stories. McDonald's, right? It's nuts. Anyways, you like order your food on the top level, and then it's in a building that's probably built in like 16 something, right? It's crazy. Anyway, you like order on the top and the like the first floor, but then you go down, and there's like multiple layers down. Anyway, it's packed. It's nuts. Anyway, so we're coming back up and coming up the stairs, and people are coming down the left side, going up the right side. This guy comes barreling down the middle, and like he bumps into me.
Yeah.
And we both, we're going because it's huge, tons of people, and I hear, "Watch where you're going, mate." And I turn back around, and I'm like, "Down the left, up the right. You coming down the middle. Why don't you watch where you're going, mate?" And then like walked out with my sister and a couple friends. Anyway, we're standing up by the river, and I look over, and by the door of this building is this guy, and he's like giving me the the wide arms, right? Like the let's fight kind of deal. And I kind of make the symbol back to him. He comes barreling down, gets in my face, and starts telling me how he's going to throw me in. I'm going to throw you in the Thames, mate. You need to go back to America where you belong, and all this kind of stuff. And of course, I'm like giving him like, dude, I'm born here, man. Like, this is my home. Like, F off, right? And so he proceeds to give me this whole exposition about blaming me for 9/11, for all of Bush's actions, the bomb, the war in Iraq, Afghanistan. It's all my fault as an American, right?
Because all people who have an American accent fully backed all of that.
Correct. Yeah, it's like
okay. I'm following that. Logically follows. Sure, let's keep going with that.
100% my fault, right? So anyway,
yeah.
He keeps talking about he's going to throw me in the Thames, and I'm like, well, dude, look, man, like I've had enough of this crap. So either throw me in the Thames or go away, right? Let's just say I use much more colorful language than that, and he like starts to walk off and then turns and like charges back at me. And I see him coming, like hip checked him, take him to the ground. I'm like, suddenly I'm beating the crap out of him on the freaking right next to the Millennium Wheel, across the street from the Thames, in front of the biggest McDonald's in the world. I'm fighting. Well, of course, like an idiot. I wasn't thinking about the premise. This is like post 9/11, like right post 9/11.
Right.
And there's security. There's cops everywhere. So all they see is me on top, like pummeling this guy. Next thing I know, I am being lifted by 3 or 4 cops. I see the sky, and then I get body slammed on the ground, right? And they're about to arrest me, And because I was working this guy over pretty good. Anyway, somebody tells like the cops like, oh well, the Yank was winning, but the other guy started it. So then you get like, very long story short, I get released. Okay, he wasn't the bad guy, all this stuff, right? And they grab him, and anyway, as they're telling me that I can leave and like hauling him off, I hear one of the bobbies say to the dude that I spent a fight with, "For God's sake, mate, if you're gonna get your ass whooped, don't let it be by a bloody Yank." But anyway, that long story is just an example of I noticed the paradigm shift dramatically. Like that was a like no ifs ands or buts. We're freaking fighting over the fact that I have an American accent, basically. But I noticed it significantly after that. Like I didn't even really notice before that. If that hadn't happened, I probably wouldn't even thought to notice it. Right. But after that I did notice that there was a shift, and then of course over the last 20 years, I guess now, I've seen the exponential growth of that. And now, like, going in Europe, you don't want to talk as much because you don't want people to hear you're an American. Oh, yeah. You don't necessarily want people to know you're an American because there's all sorts of negative ramifications that can come from that. People might try and start a fight with you. Like things like I experienced then have become much more of the norm now versus the outlier. And
that's
there's
really
like
interesting because I was a dedicated mechanic as a civilian for L3 Communications, assigned to a Special Forces group during OIF 3, which was my tour there, 13-month tax-free, was from December 05 to January 07. Okay, that's how that worked out. And I befriended a couple of nationals there, Iraqi natives, who were doing translation work for intercepted radio. And no, I don't know anything they intercepted or what the translation was. I just so everybody knows, I don't know what that was. That wasn't my job. I was a mechanic. But I smoked hookah on the roof with these guys, and just the nicest guys. And I mean, that was 2005, 2007.
Yeah. A lot of things. You said this was in Iraq.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting about that? I was actually talking to some friends that were there, and they talked about that. The point you were making, and interestingly, in that timeline as well, everything you talked about, like the friendliness, the acceptance, like the thankfulness for being there, all that kind of stuff was the norm. Right.
Yeah.
And then when Obama came in and changed the rules of engagement and removed the protection from the people like you're referring to, it was like a 180. And a friend of mine was there, he did like something ridiculous, like 6 tours, and so he was like an overlap, right? And we actually had that conversation of just the stark difference. And how a lot of times I'm not saying those individuals, specifically those individuals you dealt with did this, but he's like a lot of those people that used to had been allies became enemies.
So I got one serious thing to say before my timer runs out, and then I got a joke.
All right, hit me.
So here's the serious thing. If there were no more, talking Bible, if there were no more sea and no islands could be found, of course the crust would melt like wax because the oceans got removed. Okay, that's the serious thing. And the joke is this: that old man, that old translator guy, one day he says to me, I think he said 57. Gosh, I'm 53 now. He said, I'm ready to die and get my 47 virgins. And I said to him, is that heaven? He says, yeah, that's heaven. I said, for who?
That's a very,
he laughed.
Good point. It's a very good point.
He laughed, and he laughed heartily. He was actually had a great sense of humor about the whole thing. I said to him, I don't know what the virgins did wrong. So, John, have a great night.
I appreciate it. You too, man. Great talking with you. Yeah, I've always wondered about that concept of why would you necessarily want, like, do they remain that way? Is it like a regeneration type deal, or after the first time, it's not like the first time every time? Like, I just don't get that whole deal. It seems very, very strange, and I don't think I would want to be dealing with that every time. Even, I mean, 72 times, or whatever, the 47, whatever the number is, just seems like a rather overwhelming concept to deal with. That I don't really see that being as, yeah, I don't see that being necessarily being a positive. All right, let's check out here in the chat. What do we got going on? Okay, so Germania was talking about how he needed to go to sleep, that he wasn't going to be able to give into peer pressure and come on for 10 minutes. And yet, I think he's still inside chat. Let's see. Is Gur? Yep, he's still there. So Gur is claiming that he can't come into the stream because he's got to work tomorrow. But that was more than 10 minutes ago. And he's still here. So I guess he's not necessarily needing to go. I don't know what to tell you. All right, so keep this going for just a little bit longer. If someone wants to join in, here is the link. Puts it inside chat. It's also pinned up at the top. All right, so if anyone wants to come on in, the link is right there. Linguisty is saying that I shouldn't be pressuring people. Actually, don't push people into coming. Well, I don't think I am. Just giving people an opportunity, let them know. Probably do one more, and then gonna call it a night. I'm going for an hour and 53 minutes. See what might happen. Earlier, people were asking me if I'm going to do a review of the new Professor Dave video. And yeah, I think there'll be some stuff that comes out of that, for sure. Got to. Can't be... Can't be letting that guy get away with his bovine scatology and all that trash talking he likes to do. It's pretty funny. Yeah, I was reading some of the comments, and it's very interesting how anybody that disagrees with Wannabe Dave, his response is, you don't know anything. You don't understand. And I was reading some of this chat. Somebody's going back and forth with him about that, like asking him questions and stuff. And his response was every time was, you just don't understand things. You're not educated enough. I think I was actually, I understood what was being asked. And guy tries to clarify and like ask him, like, I put the bullet points, like, what do you mean you don't understand this, and how is this not relevant? Nope. Sat there and screamed out loud. There was no significance to what was being questioned, but I don't know. It's very strange. Very strange to see what's going on in the world. Well, I think that unless somebody comes in here in the next minute and a half, I think I'm going to call it a night. It's been a long one. Been a long day. Oh, wait. I think next week I'll be having Kenneth Summers is going to come on the stream. We're going to do an interview about his latest book on... It's a book on philosophy, actually. So get a little away from the science-y stuff. Oh, I think there'll be some science aspects of it, but going to talk about doing an interview of a book, and then we're rolling out some of the stuff for Dr. Tour, and then obviously we'll be doing probably do some rebuttals to Professor Dave. Next week might be might be interesting. Well, folks, I think I'm gonna call it a night. Again, unless somebody joins in immediately, I'm gonna call it an evening. I want to say many thanks to all the super chats and all the people who joined in. Many thanks, as always, to Ramen and Jamie was tossing some stuff in there. George, and a whole bunch of had some new folks doing some super chats. Brian F, appreciate your super chat as well, and everybody who's been helping to keep things interesting and bring good entertainment, good content, good questions. And oh, Brian says you just downloaded both the books that we talked about. And it's gonna be able to, yeah, I tell you what, man, audiobooks are the way to do it. That's what I've got. It's pretty interesting with audiobooks. I was able to build up the speed, and initially when I started listening to audiobooks again, even if I got up to like 1.5, it seemed super fast. I wasn't necessarily being able to ingest the information, and now I'm up to most of my audiobooks. I'm listening to them at like 2.35, some of them like 2.4, and being able to ingest the information. And it's actually kind of fascinating now when I go down to like normal speed. It seems like just turtle pace. It's like, oh, okay, come on. It's so boring until I speed it back up and just be able to ingest all of that knowledge so much faster. And it's been kind of interesting, actually, just thinking about it also from the context of, being able to modify my brain and the way I'm downloading the information or uploading the information. And Andrew says, next time LPP got to get a new headset. Thanks for the stream. Can't wait for the tour interview. Yep. Yeah, Andrew, love to have you on, man. Get some good conversation in there. But yeah, with that note, everyone, I appreciate you taking the time. That's 2 hours. It's been fun. I hope you will take the time to dive into all these concepts, to learn more, expand your own mind, investigate for yourself. Don't just take things that are told to you as on face value all the time. Learn the basics, learn the concepts, make sure what you're being told is true, and be able to really contemplate if your understanding of existence, other people's understanding, what you're being told, if it is valid. And ultimately, as you take the time to go down these proverbial rabbit holes, make sure that the conclusions you reach are logical, plausible, and probable. Have a great night, everybody. Appreciate you as always.